Hello, I'm Dango Rose. Welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast, where everybody's listening. The Mountaineer brings you the latest news of the Peak to Peak region in print, online, through our podcast, social media, and special publications. Now, listen in to the latest news of the area with our local journalists.
Living in rural Colorado makes you accustomed to power outages. It's a part of life, and so is being prepared for when the lights go off. But in communities like Gold Hill, aging infrastructure has turned power outages into potentially life-threatening situations. In mountain towns where cell service is spotty, landlines are necessary for emergency calls. And backup battery systems supplied by Lumen Technologies are supposed to keep phone lines operational. But some of those batteries are over 20 years old. They're failing, cutting residents off from life-saving services, leading some to speak up. Welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast. I'm Tyler Hickman. Today, we'll be meeting with the reporters who uncovered this story, a trio of CU Boulder student journalists who originally published their work with the Colorado Sun. They'll tell us how Gold Hill and many other communities have been fighting Lumen to replace these batteries for years. Before we get started, here's a quick word from today's sponsor, Eldora Mountain. Skip the epic traffic on I-70 and head to Eldora for good vibes all season long. Eldora is your go-to spot for nonstop winter fun, with great local skiing and riding, plus slopeside DJs and an après music series. Don't miss the Full Moon Ski Tour, the Timbers Rail Jam, or the morning uphill grind. Get all the details and check out weekly events at eldora.com. See you on the mountain. Now, let's get into this week's News Bites. A structure fire in Allenspark prompted emergency service responses from Boulder and Larimer counties Monday, January 26th. High winds caused the blaze to spread quickly, and the home was fully engulfed by the time responders arrived at the scene, according to a Boulder County Sheriff's Office press release. All family members and pets were safely evacuated, and the cause of the fire is under investigation. Also, on the brink of February, Netherlands' town ice rink is still liquid, and town officials worry the rink may not open at all this winter. Despite very low temps this past weekend, unseasonably warm weather has kept the Parks Department working around the clock to get the rink to freeze, which has been a challenge, says Town Manager Jonathan Kane. The town has been searching for funding that would improve the ice rink's resurfacing process, like a roof or a chiller system. Initially, efforts stalled in 2024 after a contentious meeting between the town, Parks Board, and a committee of residents. That resulted in former town administrator Nikki Dunn walking out of a meeting, and the public committee was disbanded. The town hopes to restart the process and apply for funding through Great Outdoors Colorado this year. And finally, after almost 2 years, Golden Gate Canyon Fire Protection District approved and adopted its new Community Wildfire Protection Plan last week. The extensive document lists 9 of its 11 plan units, or neighborhood sub-areas, as having high, very high, or extreme fire risk. The district urged community members to read it, saying evacuation orders will come based on the plan units. So make sure you know where your house is, and, of course, stay safe. We will drop a link to the plan in the show's description. That's all for today's News Bites. As always, pick up a copy of this week's paper or head to the mtnear.com to read these stories and so much more. Now, we're going to jump right into my interview with CU students Corey Neumeier, Sydney Schrader, and Sophia Collins, who spent a semester tracking down this story about Gold Hill residents who are left helpless when the power's down. Turns out, the issue goes far beyond the borders of the tiny historic mining village. Welcome, Corey, Sydney, and Sophia. Thanks for coming on the show today. Could you all give us a quick intro into who you are, where you're coming from?
I'm Corey. I'm a junior at CU, so I've got a year left. I'm studying journalism with a minor in history.
I'm Sydney. I'm also a senior at CU, and I'm studying journalism.
I'm Sophia. I'm a senior at CU studying journalism and minoring in media production.
This was a project for your CU News Corps, right? So I would love to hear a little bit of a super high level synopsis of what this story is. What are some of the issues that people are experiencing with the power outages and the battery backups?
So essentially, what's happening is several towns in western Boulder County. This is especially a problem for places that don't have like consistent cellular access. They have these battery backups that were installed by CenturyLink upwards of 2 decades ago, often that are supposed to keep landline and internet access online even when the power goes out. And the issue that our story is covering is basically those battery backups are not working. And CenturyLink, which is now Lumen Technologies and soon to be AT&T, is not doing anything to upgrade these things and leaving citizens out of access.
How did you guys find this? I mean, I wouldn't expect CU students to be reporting on Gold Hill. Such a fascinating story that, in kind of what is a news desert. So what brought you to Gold Hill to be reporting on this?
Yeah, so we kind of just took a general interest when we were thinking about what we wanted to do for this story around smaller mountain towns, and Sophia had kind of mentioned Gold Hill. So we wanted to do something around that. So kind of just nitpicked through things that were happening in the town and sent off like a few emails to like various residents or people that were listed on different town happenings, and kind of just was like, hey, like, is there anything going on that you think needs talked about? What's something you would like to see covered? And kind of just fell into our lap, honestly. And they were just kind of talking about the fact that like nobody's really asked them like, hey, what's going on in Gold Hill? And then also too, like, that they've had problems in the past with this issue, and again, like, there just hasn't been a lot of awareness around it.
Yeah, so when you start reaching out to the residents and you start to hear the complaints about these battery backups and not having emergency services during power outages, what was the next step after you started to hear about these issues?
Our first point of contact was a woman named Maggie Sims, who was a resident who had lived there her whole life. And then she put me in contact with Rich Caudill, who is the current fire chief.
Yeah, I think what really got us going is Rich like sat us down in his office and showed us a bunch of emails between him and Lumen correspondents. And like a bunch of town officials were attached, and other fire chiefs and mayors around the area had kind of been involved in this. And we were like, okay, this isn't actually just an issue in Gold Hill that like happens every once in a while. Like this happens all across the Front Range region, and like specifically in Western Boulder County. But it's like not even like an issue of like, oh, they just live in this remote place. No, there's a company that's like prohibiting them from potentially reaching 911 if the case arises. So I think him showing us those emails like gave us a sense of urgency. Like we really need to reach out to other places and try to contact Lumen and see what's actually going on.
The problem that we're talking about is like these batteries that are supposed to kick in when the power goes out, whether that's like a fire, a flood, or one of these planned outages that are becoming the norm. At what point did folks in Gold Hill really start to like recognize the urgency of having this backup?
The earliest back thing I can remember is the 4 Mile Canyon fire, where we first heard they were having trouble with it. So with ion electron batteries, like you're kind of expecting this exponential life drop off. I mean, this is true of any battery. We're having this problem with like electric cars now in terms of battery life. So they got to like half the battery life. They originally lasted for something like a week. They got to around half battery life during the 4 Mile Canyon fire. And since then, it's just dropped off precipitously to the point where they're lasting maybe 20 to 30 seconds when the power gets cut off, according to Leslie Finn, who was one of the people we interviewed.
So when that battery kicks in and lasts for 20 seconds and then they are out of power, what does that do to the community? What's the repercussions of not having that battery backup?
It depends on the people who are in the community. In our story, kind of the elderly couple, the husband of which had an internal bleeding incident, and because it was during a snowstorm, they basically couldn't get down the hill. They had to be taken down by the volunteer fire department. Ultimately, they were able to get help, but had the situation been more dire, it would have been impossible. So it just kind of depends person to person. But a lot of the people who are at the most risk, who are elderly, they don't really have systems in place to take care of it. And so they're looking on help from other people in the community, from the fire department, that kind of thing.
If these batteries are working correctly, they get the replacement, like what are community members doing in the case that they need emergency assistance in Gold Hill? Is there a fail-safe for that? How do they get together and help each other when there is like an emergency response need without the power in town?
Yeah, that's kind of the thing. You're kind of left high and dry in the case of the most recent example, when there was all the high wind warnings in pretty much all of Boulder County, they had the preemptive shutdown, which they knew it was going to happen, but again, there wasn't anything in place. And I did a follow-up interview with Rich over Christmas break, and he had basically indicated to me that like they knew that they weren't going to have communications, and Lumen had essentially been unresponsive per usual. So they took precautions to just like have people available to check on people that were most highly susceptible. And one woman did actually fall down and have to be helped by the volunteer fire department. So yeah, I mean, that's not a very reliable system to just have somebody like deployed on foot, like ready to save the day. Lumen doesn't necessarily take this issue seriously until there is like a serious risk at hand. And some of the requests that they've made, Lumen will respond and be recipient of mapping a crisis plan and then deploying the resources upon crisis, not like before, which is really hazardous, especially for an aged population.
It seems like there's a couple of different players here. Where does the county fit into all of this? What's their relationship like with Lumen? And is there anything that the county can do to kind of step in and help their voices to be heard?
All of the county commissioner members were kind of aware of this issue, but it wasn't like as pressing, I guess, so to say. But the awareness around this issue definitely heightened in the last like month and a half, I would say. And so there has been communication between all of them, kind of just trying to like band together like what permissions and things that like they can request legally. So they are reevaluating it in state legislation right now. There hasn't been full fruition in changing the policy around it, but they are revisiting policy and taking it to a legislative measure at this time.
Did you guys ever hear from Lumen?
So I emailed them and basically just provided a space for them to comment on this story and really just give any response. And then they were like, we have nothing else to say to the Colorado Sun. And that was kind of the end of it, in terms of our interaction with them. And then in terms of interaction with like towns in Lumen, it's pretty much just been, we can't deploy resources unless it's like a crisis situation, which again, super counterintuitive.
AT&T is going to be the new parent company. Is there any fear in the community that relationships are going to get worse, or are people a bit more optimistic?
We didn't have a chance to like run that past our sources, but in the wake of the story, there has been a new, I think it was the Boulder County Commissioner opened a new working group in order to try to get it resolved.
It does seem like from this, like,
yeah,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
reaching out.
the story that people were potentially like a little bit more, like there'd be like more of a fighting chance for more urgency around like maintaining this infrastructure with AT&T, but you can't really know for certain on that. It's just a general attitude that we picked up on.
Do you know what is next for Gold Hill? Have they been able to come up with a solution either themselves or collaboratively? Is there any progress for them?
So far it looks like the progress, because again, still Lumen isn't necessarily being responsive to this issue. I think their next step is just leveraging what they can do in terms of legislation. When I was talking to Rich, like before this story came out, I was kind of like, what is the ideal? Like, because obviously you can't keep waiting on them to fix something if they just like simply aren't going to do it, because again, this is a hazard. And then there was that conversation around switching to Starlink and other methods like that. And the broadband equity program, BEAD, a lot of the money that got awarded for that was towards things like Starlink as opposed to this. So even if it does like kind of look like forward looking, like Starlink is probably the most sustainable and like just makes the most sense like economically, but also people don't necessarily agree with that for whatever political controversy there is around that. That was another thing that kind of stuck out in some interviews with residents, is like they do have a hesitancy towards switching.
I did find that really interesting too, actually, the fact that a lot of residents were very hesitant to use Starlink because of the ties to Elon Musk. So is there like another solution? Do you think that people will eventually just kind of move towards that satellite broadband? Or do you think that people are going to continue to be resistant to that and want a solution that's more oriented with local government and the power grid supplier?
It seems like at this point, it's more about getting justice, I guess, like receiving the equity that they deserve compared to like people living in the city of Boulder. Lumen should be providing this service to us, and we're not just going to like give up just for convenience, just for the ease of the transition. From my experience in Gold Hill, talking to the residents, it seems like they're a hardy stock, and they just like want to see it out and aren't afraid to cause some ruckus and be stubborn in the process.
I really appreciate it, and best of luck with the follow on the story. Keep us in the loop, and I hope you guys keep doing good work and can move the needle a little bit more on the issue.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
You can head to the Colorado Sun's website to read the full story, but we will also drop a link to it in the show's description. Thank you so much to Corey, Sydney, and Sophia for hopping on the podcast to talk about this. And once again, congrats on the byline in the Sun. It's such a great story. Go check it out, especially if your town relies on Lumen's backup batteries. As always, if you like today's episode, please like, subscribe, and share it with your friends, family, neighbors. It is the best way that you can help us grow the show. If you have a tip, a comment, or you just want to get in touch, shoot me an email at tyler@themountainear.com. This is the Mountaineer Podcast. I'm Tyler Hickman. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
And that's it for our show. Subscribe online to get more access to more news, weekly updates to our community calendar, and a link to our YouTube channel by visiting themountaineer.com. Be sure to use the coupon code PODCAST when subscribing for a 10% discount, only available to our listeners. If you are in the local peak-to-peak area, be sure to pick up a print edition of The Mountaineer at a local business. I'm Dango Rose. Thank you for listening.